This plenary session, Constraint as a Source of Creative Possibilities, will delve into this through a fireside chat and a panel discussion. The topic of the fireside chat is responsible construction, creating a new paradigm. The construction industry is among the major sectors that contribute significantly towards emission of greenhouse gases, which have a major impact on the climate change and is responsible for about 91% of overall greenhouse gases. 19% of overall greenhouse gases emission globally. While several countries have fixed their targets for zero carbon rating for new building construction, it is unclear how this will be achieved in India, where the average consumer is extremely cost sensitive and most likely unwilling to pay for an extra price for sustainable material and design. Under these constraints, how is the building industry viewing the problem and working out a solution? Let us hear about some of these complex issues from the conversation of two progressive architects, the fireside chat, Responsible Construction, Creating a New Paradigm. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Anjan Mitra and Dr. Vinod Gupta. Please, sir, come onto the stage. Anjan Mitra is a designer, an architect by passion, and a creative thinker in search for responsible design practices, a process that has taken him beyond the physicality of architecture to a holistic experience to build environment. This journey started with his design practice, The Appropriate Alternative, in 1992, and sustained over the last 3 decades. He believes that the most sustainable model of development is rooted in conservation and value addition and can be made possible through addition of responsible design practices. Dr. Vinod Gupta is alumnus of School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and IIT Delhi, and from IIT Delhi. Dr. Vinod Gupta has been a teacher in architecture and industrial design at School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi. He is partner in Space Design Consultants and CEO of Opus Indigo Designs Private Limited, Fellow of Indian Institute of Architects, member of Institute of Indian Interior Designers, founder members of Gubi Alliances for Sustainable Habitat, and founder member of Griha Council. So I welcome both of you, and we look forward to learning from you how we can do responsible construction. Thank you.
The current situation is scary. So I take that take it from there and try and understand what is really the role of construction in kind of today's context and also a future idea. If you really remember what Jayashree has said, the kind of footfall change, the kind of built environment change, that has happened primarily of one human expression, and that is construction. Construction is something which is, I would say, is more of a displacement. It is an act which is basically a violent act. It kind of, the moment we conceive, we want to make a statement. So construction necessarily symbolizes a kind of an aggression into the local habitat, local flora, local fauna, ecology, in every part. That is the way of things that has happened. And this particular trend of construction has vastly changed from the construction practices that existed in the pre-industrial area. If you really recall anything in Hindu philosophy, it is that the human beings are considered as a part of a larger universe. there is a kind of a imbalance between the humans and the Prakriti, the nature, Mother Nature, in all its forms. So what happened is that every small little things that is being projected as a shelter or some other occupation, it was always conceived as a part of that whole system. The balance is an essential component, because if you are part of it, you always think of a balance. But things started changing when we kind of overlook into this, and then with the industrialization, suddenly the technology has started over, and it mainly challenged the one course that we are not part of the nature. We are here to dominate nature. And that is a kind of an attitude which actually is manifested in construction. Roads, infrastructure, buildings, building typologies, everything changed. The way people interact also changes. So when we talk about construction, we have to really understand construction from this particular manner. Earlier, the building construction was a kind of a circular system. Everybody knows that it needs repair, it kind of comes back to the original cycle, so it's more of a cycle. Today, we have conceived construction almost like a project. So there is a starting point and then there is an end point. In fact, who is going to use it? There is no connection. So construction largely today, the way we see, is completely separated from the society as a whole. And this is very disruptive. So in this kind of a parameter, I think we have to really look at the construction as a whole, and that is how I find that the topic of this today is that responsible construction, because we are not taking any responsibilities as far as the construction is concerned. We always think sustainability is a concept. Sustainability is in the thinking process. Sustainability cannot be with a material until and unless it is like Mother Earth, which kind of has an automatic decay. Anything apart from that has a process of putting it together. I think in that kind of a scenario, I would ask Dr. Gupta to elaborate on this particular aspect of sustainability, because through his GRIA Council and his prolonged experience in this, that how really the modern construction is thinking about this.
When we talk about sustainable construction, we think of rating systems that define, how good that particular construction is, and we have what we call green buildings, high performance buildings, and the latest word that we are using for this is net zero buildings. Net zero means we don't import or export anything out of this, and the system that we have, first we define the goals. So the goal is really for us to have less greenhouse gas emission, which is what this talk has been this morning. So we, and less energy use is one of the ways in which these greenhouse gas emissions are supposed to be taken care of. So the systems that we have for measuring this, and once we have our goals, and then we, process this, the building process that Anjan was talking about, and finally when the result is obtained, we can measure it in terms of LEED, which is an American system, and GRIHA, which is modeled after LEED in some ways, and it defines what a good building ought to be. And ECBC, which is the Energy Conserving Building Code, which defines how much energy you may use in any particular building. So all of these, both of these systems of LEED and GRIHA, they talk about energy use, water use, less waste to be generated and less pollution to be generated. But the main thing which they deal with is indoor air temperature and indoor air quality. That means what we are breathing inside the building should be good air and without pollutants, and we should all be comfortable and so on. So thermal comfort and indoor air quality is what it is about. And We have been making buildings, these rating systems came about 20 years back. In 2001, I think the first LEED building was built in India. I've been working with these kind of buildings for about 50 years. So what we have found is that we may achieve good efficiency through any of these systems, because they're basically talking about using more efficient air conditioning, more efficient insulation, and more efficient faucets in the toilets and so on. The question is whether our goal of using less energy is achieved. The answer is no. We have not been able to do that. Our energy use, water use and things, all of these have actually been increasing. And this is because of what we call the Jevons paradox, which is that as we improve efficiency, we tend to use that thing much more often. We see this most with cars. As cars, as our highway speed increases, it does not decrease the travel time because we travel further distances. If we have more efficient cars, it does not reduce our fuel consumption because we will use this more often. So, if we keep in mind the ultimate aim that we have, which is to reduce these consumption and not simply to improve the efficiency, we will have to do something else. So, my personal experience is that by making things more efficient, this does not change. But if you can change things in such a way that human behavior changes, that is the thing which makes it possible for us to achieve our objectives. I'll give you here examples of two university campuses which we have designed. One is for NIIT in Rajasthan, in Nimrana, and the other one is for IIT Gandhinagar, which is in Gujarat. Very similar kind of climate in a way. Rajasthan is probably a little bit drier. So what we did in Rajasthan was to use an evaporative cooling system, not install any air conditioning at all in the entire campus. Not allow any cars or motorcycles to be driven in the campus at all. All of them must be parked outside or near the entrance, and no air conditioning was allowed. So the university took great pride in this. And then they started talking about the students that don't worry about being slightly uncomfortable. What is important is that you are living in a sustainable building or in a sustainable campus and so on, and this really changed the behavior. After we had finished the first set of buildings, somebody else came and the university decided no, they are not going to have air conditioning in any of the new buildings. Now, I'll compare this with what happens at IIT Gandhinagar. They were concerned, we planned the campus again with even more important principles, more important designs or different designs. But air conditioning was not taken out of the system, it was very much there. Except that they use a very efficient system of air conditioning. And the net result is that now they have air-conditioned hostels, air-conditioned laboratories, all the administrative buildings and everything is air-conditioned. It's not that the campus is bad, it's just that the goals which they were looking for were efficiency, and they wanted to provide the highest level of comfort for the elite students that they have in this campus. And they probably achieved this objective. But if we look at the objective from a larger perspective, which is a global perspective, and which is to reduce energy use in buildings, that does not seem to happen there. We have, much less use of water, perhaps in this, and I will talk about that a little more. Now, these systems that I talked about, which we use to measure how efficient our buildings are, most of these apply what is called a per square meter standard. Per square meter standard is how much energy do you consume in per square meter of the building space that you have built? Or, you know, now we are not in a situation where our country has a set standard of how much space we can build. So the end result can be something like what we have, Mr. Ambani's house, where there are 4 residents, but they have 60,000 square meter of space. They have built the most efficient, energy conserving building or most environment friendly building that they could possibly build. But is this sustainable to have this kind of construction? No. The whole concept of sustainability is something which we need to define a little better in our own context. The European concept of sustainability given to us at the United Nations by the Brundtland Commission is that, you know, we are fighting with or we are trying to save our future. But in India, we are fighting against each other. There are so many different sections in the society, and it is said that 1% of the top Indians control 50% of the wealth in this country. And the top 10% controls 75% of the wealth of the country. And if we take the bottom 50%, they have only 5% or so. So in this kind of a situation, any standard that we have which says 1 square meter, how much does it consume? It doesn't work for us. We have to look for our own solutions. And the only solution that I've found is that if we can, instead of thinking about efficiency, if we can think simply about changing human behavior, that is what will get us to come to a better situation.
We are having this making it possible seminar where in a completely artificial environment which doesn't justify itself. So this is a kind of a situation. There is no daylight, but there is plenty of daylight outside. And what we are striving for is a kind of a artificial comfort zone, and we are talking about sustainability in general terms. This is not done. I think we have to change our perceptions first. On one hand, as Dr. Gupta has amply identified, that human psychology is hunger. Hunger for comfort, hunger for status, hunger for so many other greeds. If that doesn't change, and your hunger for controlling others, if that is not going to change, obviously the construction industry which feeds this is definitely not going to change. And the kind of construction when we talk about 10% of actual constructions. 90% of these constructions are beyond our domain, which is where the mass of the built area is being defined. Who follows what kind of logic? So until and unless we change our perceptions about the construction that we are trying to do, is first we have to have that the overall concept that I am part of this nature. If I want to reverse that, the first thing is we have to change and make ourselves humble enough to understand that I am part of a system, I am not the system. So if we take that system in part, then the way we approach construction is making it purposeful. Why I am trying to do it. That's number one. Number two is whatever we intrude is displacement. Now construction is displacement in the large scale. You have urban redevelopment, which is a major large scale thoroughfare. We create huge scale infrastructure. The Uttarakhand and the Himachal Pradesh is reeling under, Sikkim is reeling under because of extensive landslides, because it completely destroys the ecology. In terms of tourism, in terms of economic boost, what we are trying to do is completely destabilize the culture. Now, this is something which is very, very erroneous. So, instead, if we just think that can we reverse this, now that reversal process has to include that first and foremost, can instead of displacement can be more accommodative. Earlier in the Indian system, we don't throw anything, all the waste taking from our kitchen to everything that we use, we used to recycle, we used to reuse. If our clothes are torn, we just mend it up and use it for that matter. The old things we kind of stitch it, like our grandmother's heritage and other thing, we re-stitch, we actually wear it with the greater elan. Where is that system gone? So we don't have any respect for what we have. We are talking about heritage. We don't understand heritage. Because our heritage is the way we connect with the nature, the way we connect with the people, the way we connect with the society is completely gone. So if we kind of just reverse this back, then we don't look at our old things in the similar manner. Instead of development, because the inner city cannot be developed, what we are doing is infringing on the farmlands and the marginal. Our development has become essentially marginal. By doing that, we are creating more kind of road infrastructures, creating more pollutions, and all these gas emissions, what we are talking about when we talk about a unit, then it makes something, but when it is happening at a very large scale, it is enormously destabilizing. So, construction industry can we really think of something else as a more kind of a healing process, of a more accommodative process or a negotiated process? It is that over the time some things is not there. And also when we talk about construction, we don't talk about maintenance because we think everything is maintenance free. Permanence is something that we all achieve at. But practically there is nothing which is permanent. Until and unless you really cultivate towards that, so maintenance becomes a headache. So whatever establishment that you have done over the period, because of non-maintenance, it kind of completely derodes. So I think in this kind of situation, I will ask and try and showcase an alternative. We will be talking about very recently in Calcutta, you know, there are the old Chinatown is there, and there are very large kind of properties which almost amounts to acres, built over centuries and in an ad hoc manner. So obviously, if you call for the ground coverage standards, there are almost 90% which is ground coverage. Now, it's a very kind of stingy sites, and after the kind of environment regulation, now the tanneries has been shifted to outskirts of the Calcutta city. What happens to these tanneries with that huge kind of stock that we have? So here is one tannery that I am talking about. It is in the Tangra area, which is extremely congested, and this is where the very major Chinese polarizations were there. So what happens is now these Chinese tanneries, these are kind of landlocked. The road space is not enough. It's not a developable proposition. So what will actually happen to them? So we take this opportunity and then we thought, can we retrofit and make an adaptive reuse, make this as a part of a major kind of a development campaign? So we start with that kind of a example. Now it has almost like 70,000 square foot built up area and built over, as I've said, centuries. So the basic fundamental issue that we are not going to demolish this tannery, number one. So there is no kind of demolition construction waste which is normally associated with any development program. So first is we'll try to use, reuse, then we want to recycle as much as possible, and we want to retrofit to give a new lease of life. So these are basic mandates, and there are many buildings were actually being pulled down, so we collected a lot of recyclable materials from there, and then we kind of slowly move forward in terms of actually designing it. So this is the way the situation that you see is on different phases of the buildings which are existed at there, and the kind of situation, some has 16 feet height, some are 20 feet high, so there is a height, volume wise there is a kind of a play, and absolutely non-serviced kind of a floor space, no daylight penetration, nothing. So what we have done is, we then actually try to parcel this out depending on the kind of volume what we can do where the sanitation facilities, how we can bring out the daylights within, taking out some part of the walls so that daylight can infiltrate into this building, strengthening the building from within so that it is now adaptable to accommodate new kind of activities. And as a result, we have built almost another 30,000 in this area, so almost 1 lakh square feet without demolishing much. So we have inserted, because where there we have found 20 feet height, we have inserted kind of a mezzanine floor, and we created a different workspace. Now there are mandatory stipulations of environment, so the kind of fire control and other systems were kind of introduced into this. While we doing that, we used papercrete as a simple because there are a lot of those products were available we mixed with concrete. So we inserted MS. Today we are talking about steel not being a very sustainable material. We have used steel because that with this kind of a volume is the most apt kind of insertion which is possible without damaging the initial structure and retrofitting. In fact, in some cases we use recycled steel also. So as and when the situation came up, so we actually developed on that. Finally, the roof we have strengthened, so that became actually if you know a bit of the Tangra area, there was no playground, nothing of that sort. So we have converted the roof into a community playground. Now because this is a wholesale Chinese community, we thought that even the streets, so whatever the street mandatory setbacks we have done, we have created community library into the street space, all because of some recycled books we have actually borrowed. We have created the halls which acted like a banquet for the Chinese community. So that is the way a development became a part and parcel of a community development. So everybody kind of thing added to this. We have created a football ground and indoor game stadium. Today, I feel that this is a place which is now operating an 150 skill development center, acting as a graphic studio, where in fact quite a large number of brands are actually getting their things designed. It has opened up a bakery because Chinese bakery was very famous. So they have opened up a bakery which is involving a lot of community facilities. It has also acted like a kind of a studio and also a gym into this area. So together this place has become an ILIT creative campus. ILIT is a kind of a new leadership entrepreneurship program. So they are actually operating this from this kind of a situation. And in fact, without adding any, without actually disrupting anything, so they have called me, what is, how you manage this construction development waste? There's virtually no construction development waste. In fact, whatever the waste that we can collect it, we have used it. So in a way, it is a kind of breathing, all the thermocols and other thing we use for the acoustic panels. The internal, some part of has been air conditioned, rest of the things is naturally ventilated. In a whole, it created a new microsystem of the new system of development, and which is, as all of the discussion that we are talking about, the green emissions, the pollution level, the livability which is not been addressed, that is one thing which is at the stake, at the measure in the new construction practice. So this is a new way we have to look at the construction. If we can use that, probably we will figure out at every possible situation and every possible context, we can then identify a natural course of construction that will take place and how we can engage our large scale living heritage, the masons, the traditional wisdom involved. In rural areas, we can definitely use them in type of building development practices. So what Dr. Gupta was saying, all those environment quality consciousness that we have adapted, if we can somehow converse them with our lifestyle and with our thinking processes, I think we can completely rechange and reshape our construction and development process. Thank you very much.
To stay informed about the startup ecosystem, subscribe to my Startup TV.